Hello and welcome to our legislative update for 2019. My name is Deborah Bowles. I'm the President, CEO of the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce that covers all of Morrison County and the districts that our elected officials are representing as well. We have with us today Representative Ron Kresha and Senator Paul Gazelka. We will be starting with opening statements about what they are working on, any of the bills they have, and what committees they serve on and their other duties. And then we will open it up for questions from the audience. So Representative Kresha, would you please start?
Sure. Thanks, Deb, and thanks everyone for being here. Nice crowd. I'll be brief because I really want to get to your questions. This year, a couple of things that I've been working on. I'm the lead on the Ed Finance. So in the minority, I'm the lead on that, not in the majority. So we're working on the school funding bills. We're starting to hear some of those bills come through. And what that's going to look like, I cannot tell you, because until the governor releases his budget and gives us a framework of what that will be, that number is still going to be suspect. Plus, you've probably heard that the wonderful surplus, magical large number is dwindling. And so people are starting to look at what those priorities will be. And this is the time of the year that everyone throws things out there just because it's their wishes. And when they finally get the budget, then we have to get down to the hard conversations of what we can actually afford. So that's education finance. One of the things that's important to me on that is continued equity for the schools in the rural parts of the state. And that's been what I've been pushing for a long time. There's conversations out there about LGA. That's been put out there. I think those are good ideas as well. Broadband, continuing to look at how we're going to improve our infrastructure for the rural parts of the state, because at the heart of everything that I see on the economic side, it's still a people problem. We don't have enough workers moving into rural Minnesota to replace the death rate, and you could help with this. I'm looking at some of you younger people, because if we up the birth rate a little bit, isn't yesterday Valentine's Day? So 9 months from now we should see that. But what we're seeing is the birth rate is not replacing the death rate and people and the retirement rate. So that's a big problem, because not only is it a people problem, but it's a tax problem. If we don't replace people buying homes and properties, our tax base reduces, and then that creates more of a burden on the state that, frankly, is harder and harder to get to. So I've been promoting rural broadband and rural economic growth for a long time because of that. We have to move that through. It can't just happen with entitlements. And the last, I have a long list of things, whether it's infrastructure projects that we've tried to do, helping out with trying to get some matching dollars for DOT if we do the over the railroad and over the river in Little Falls, as well as Flensburg has some issues on their sewer system. And the St. Gates opioid, I didn't want to miss that one. That one, those folks have done such a good job, and they've frankly gotten national recognition, and we want to make sure we continue those efforts. The one thing that I want to point out on the opioid, and we hear the rhetoric a lot of going after big pharmacy. I mean, if you can take any formula down there and you put big in front of it, you put X, and you can make a statement, whether it's big tobacco, big pharmacy, big whatever. The fact of the matter is, what the St. Gabe's folks did was they just chose to roll their sleeves up and take pills off the street, and that's what's working. We can talk about the role that pharmaceuticals play, or that the doctors may play, or that users play, but the reality is, because of pain medications, a lot of people have had a longevity that they may not have had otherwise. We have addiction problems that stem from meth, heroin, opioids, and so forth, and we need to address the addiction problem and not play the blame game, because when we go after the blame game, what we do is we start throwing money in places that aren't going to be helpful. And when you look at what St. Gabe's has done, like I said, those doctors and that task force has gone through prescription by prescription to take and reduce pain management and opioid management, which is the right solution. So that's a couple things that I would throw out. I promise to be brief, so I'll turn it over to you, Senator.
That's a political brief. So Well, good morning. I'm the Senate Majority Leader, which is the head of the Senate. I think you all kind of know that. It's kind of a crazy thing because I'm just a regular guy. Ron's a regular guy, and we get to be down at the Capitol trying to speak for our area. And I just wanted to mention a couple things that are unique this time around. We have a new governor, and we have a new House leadership, and then the Senate is the same. And so it's a new mix of people. And I'll just say, divided government seems to be what Minnesota wants. We're the only one in the country that has divided government right now. And so it is what Ron and I are tasked to work within. It's a little tougher in the minority, but frankly, Ron is very, very effective at what he does. And because he treated people right when he was in the majority, I am convinced that they will continue to rely on him. So that's kind of the overview. But with the new governor, I've met with him a half a dozen times. I am optimistic that we will be able to get things done for Minnesota. He's going to be on one side, I'm on the other side, and there's going to be certainly clashing, but I think you'll find it generally respectful. In fact, I confronted him on a pipeline issue up north where he extended a lawsuit that a lot of people thought he wouldn't. And I called him the night before and left him a message that said, I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm hitting you tomorrow because I believe you're on the wrong side of it. But it wasn't, so the goal is not to, the goal is to communicate. And when you do that, you manage to get a lot done. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is a few things. Well, no, I'll wait for the questions. If they don't come up, I'll hit them at the end. So we'll do it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you, Senator. So we would start with our first comments and questions. Whoever would like to step up.
Yes, my name is Bob Rikailen. I've been a resident here in the community for it seems forever now. What I'm here just to mention to Representative Kresha and to Senator Gazelka, the other day in the Brainerd paper, a couple of your colleagues, they're introducing a bill to slash the taxes on this charitable gambling, which has been one of the most unfair things, like for our local Lions Club, the Exchange Club, other clubs in the area, Randall Cushing, what have you. They take way too much of our taxes. The fact that we start at like a 9%, which is no problem, but goes up to 36% as far as after we reach a certain level of sales. Now, I'm not the gaming manager, and the other ones, I tried to get them here this morning, but they're just sort of tied up. So I thought a 55-year-old member of Lions Club could still come and speak his mind, which I'm going to do. The fact that it's just way out of hand, serving on that same committee when we see what charities that what we could give to, and now the state, how they've just come in and slashed this here, and not slashed this, taken away from the local clubs. I mean, it's just not correct. So I want you two to really get behind, is it Representative Rudd and then Lushik up in the Cross Lake and Aiken area who introduced this bill? I know that you two have to be behind this. And I'm sorry that we as a Lion hadn't come to you before to introduce this, but the Brainerd paper was really on the ball. That's my big thing. The second thing I just wanted to mention was Enbridge. Now, I'm not, just a local person just hearing all the things, but I wish you'd get to the governor. Isn't that company trying to be proactive as far as just maintaining their lines? Why are they getting so much grief as far as on it? I don't understand it. So if you can expound on that after a while, Paul or Ron, I sure appreciate it. But I should have addressed this at first. Thank you both for serving. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so I'm going to address the charitable gambling, and with that, Bob, thank you. Al Lund, who's been in charge of that, and one of the advocates for that, has been in contact with us. I sit on the Commerce Committee. We've heard that bill now 3 sessions in a row, and we've tried to act on it. The crux of it is what you absolutely said, is when you go to the local establishments and you're out having drinks and a supper and you decide to play the pull tabs because you want to support the local, like whether here it's the ski team or there's lots of one, that money should stay here. That should stay here. And when a majority of that leaves the community, that is not in the best interest. So we've supported that. Unfortunately, we've had a difficult time getting the Department of Commerce to agree with us and to find a tax, a place where we can reduce that in the taxes. So we're trying, we hear you. And I believe it was Representative Lewick and Senator Ruud that have introduced that, so thank you.
Yeah, we just said, why don't you take one, I'll take the other. But I definitely agree with Representative Kresha on that issue, and maybe we can make some movement this year. And then on the Enbridge, the Line 3 pipeline, it has gone through a series of process, much permitting, finally got, I believe, a unanimous vote, or at least a large majority from the PUC to move forward, the final moment, and then the Commerce Commissioner sued the PUC. So it's like Governor Dayton's right hand slapping his left hand. I mean, it's like, so it's very, very frustrating. We went through another level of the court. We thought that Governor Walz was just going to say, fine, I'm done, I won't take it any farther in the courts. But that was the battle, frankly, between the blue-collar unions and workers and the extreme environmental left. And in the end, the extreme environmental left won. And so you have many people that are upset with the governor for doing that, not just Republicans. Senator Bach, the minority leader, was very upset. Some of the trade union leadership was very upset. I think it'll eventually happen, but what if it's another 3 to 6 months of wasted time? It's a 51-year-old pipe that they want to update with a current pipe. So it's not just the jobs, it's also actually the best direction for the environment. So it made no sense to me, but it is what it is.
Good, thank you. And our next question.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Earl.
Hi. Earl Ottman, former business manager at Pierce Schools. Still on the Masbo Legislative Committee as the vice chair, and I'm here on Masbo's behalf, and so to promote their legislative platform. But mainly, I'm going to be talking just about your favorite topic and mine on school finance, and that's special ed cross-subsidy. For those who don't know, special education services are mandated by federal and state law. While school districts have few options to control these costs of providing these services, for each student that's identified with special ed, those students must be served. We have no choice. Although the state provides districts funding for special ed services, it does not fully cover the costs for those districts to do so. This unfunded portion, referred to as the special ed cross-subsidy, must be subsidized with funds that would otherwise be used for regular programs, and in which an increasing special ed funding will have an equal and reciprocal impact on regular program resources, freeing up money for regular programs. Now, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, I was in a similar meeting such as this, only the individuals sitting in those chairs were different. And it was Senator Samuelson and Representative Wenzel. And that topic then was special ed cross-subsidy. And Senator Samuelson, I won't forget it because it's hard to forget for me. You know, I've been in school finance for nearly 40 years. But this one sticks in my mind, and that was he was not going to increase this funding because it would leave the federal government off the hook. And some younger individual, to be renamed nameless, said, but do you realize, Senator, that you're leaving the districts on the hook? And just to give you an idea, in 2003, the cross subsidy was $375 million statewide. In FY19, it's projected to be over $700 million. This means those funds can't be used for the purpose that they were originally intended for, and that's general instruction. And I'll say this, adding money alone won't fix this problem. It has to be targeted equitably, and reporting policies need to change. Teachers need to be able to teach instead of doing paperwork. And there's a lot of paperwork being done out there, not only for those teachers, but also for the district office staffs, the administration. Under the current funding formula, special ed funding is unpredictable. It's the second largest funding source we have, but it's the most unpredictable. I was at a workshop last week at the Masbo conference, and for 2 hours, the business managers in that room learned about special ed funding. Now there's newbies in there, and there's experienced business managers in that room. And I can tell you how I felt at the end of that meeting. This is what I learned. As I said, it's unpredictable. Now, if you were above the funding cap, you are not going to get any more money. And districts won't really know what their special ed funding will be until about 8 months after the close of the school year. It's a frustration that every business manager, when asked how much money are we going to get, can't really answer that question to their school boards and to their staff. We need some help. We need some funding in this area specifically. We can't kick this issue down the road another 30 years. Districts cannot maintain this level of underfunding. So I appreciate your help. I know you've done it in the past. I've appreciated working with you. And so again, just thank you.
So I'll take that one. And Earl's one of the most well-respected finance people in the state. He knows what he's talking about. And I've had the pleasure of working with him when I first came up here. I wish we could get to this right now. And let me tell you why we can't. And we're trying. I know, in fact, Senator Pratt just released a special ed policy bill that I've signed on in the House. We're going to try to redo some policy stuff. I think it was Candy Ojai Schools did a whole full matrix of looking at where we can reduce special ed, litigation, paperwork, and policies. Here's the challenge that is in front of us on this. Education dollars are very competitive. I sit on the Ed Finance Committee, and I will get the groups that will come in. Masbo will come in. We'll talk about the cross-subsidy. We'll talk about some other things, and you're absolutely right. If I had my way, we would address this now. The problem is, and this is not for you, Earl, this is just for the general. The problem is right behind Masbo, the superintendents will come in, and I've sat down with the superintendents. I said, okay, let's do the cross-subsidy this year, and then they'll say, you know what, why don't you just put it on the formula and we'll deal with it. And the problem is, I know why they're saying that, and because I've asked them, I'm like, well, what if I just dedicate it to cross-subsidy? What if we actually address this? They would rather see it on the formula because they want flexibility. And then Education Minnesota will come in and say, no, we don't want you to deal with it at all. What we really want, and they'll list their reasons that go to teacher pay. And I understand why they're advocating for that. Then I will get group after group that will come in and say, you know what? Let's just add this to the special ed because we have these kids that need these. And suddenly we get this scope creep of special ed that gets more expensive for the schools. So what I'm pointing out is you're absolutely right, and it's probably the most difficult thing we're facing with. I don't know how we get the feds to step up. I just had another presentation in Ed Finance this week, and we saw the projections. I mean, you look at it now and it's scary. You look at 10 years from now, and the widening of the funding is going to get worse and worse. So you're right. We talk about this every day, and I wish we had more progress to report to you on that. I don't have a better answer.
Which is why I look to Ron for many of the education issues, because he was a former teacher and helps me navigate where I want to be on it. There is a court case, if it hasn't been announced, will be announced that somebody's suing the state related to special education, even though it mostly is a federal issue. And so I don't know where that's going to go either. So stay tuned.
Okay, good. Thank you. Danny.
Yes. My name is Danny Noss. I wear many hats, but first of all, I want to thank Debbie and the Chamber of Commerce and Senator Gazelka and Representative Kresha for holding these meetings throughout their districts, because it means a lot to the people out in the rural areas. Let me see. I'll start off as the treasurer of the Camp Ripley Veteran State Trail. I know that there's been a lot of discussion with both of you, from Frank Gosiak, our president, and I want to thank you very much for all that you've done. That's been a very tiring 10, 11-year thing before we got it started, but it looks like we're actually going to start putting some trail down. So that's very exciting. I want to thank both of you for that. Let me see, what was the other one? As gambling manager for Randall VFW, I want to thank this gentleman for bringing up those taxes. I think ours are 36 to 39%. Now we don't have a lot to give out to the community, but it holds us back a lot from what we can do with those taxes. Then, as the commander of the Morrison County Disabled American Veterans Chapter 12, I look forward to meeting both of you at the Veterans on the Hill Day on March 20th. I'm working actively to get a 1 or 2 busfuls of veterans from this area to take the ride down and spend the day with you, and I want to thank you. Then last, as the mayor of Randall, I want to there's a big concern in the rural area about this red flag bill. It's very concerning, and I don't know the specifics of the bill. I haven't read it, but you hear these different things like, I can walk up and not know this lady here and say, I think she's a danger. I think you need to take her gun away. Well, anybody in any elected position, I probably have at least 5 or 10 people, and Randall is the mayor, that would gladly say that. So, it's really a disturbing thing for me. I know there's other states that have already passed them, but I hope that Minnesota never gets that far as to pass anything like the red flag bill. And I want to thank you again for letting me speak. Thank you.
A couple comments that Dan has there. I'll hit the red flag one first. It basically, as written by Democrats in the House, allows next to no due process, which is the problem, is you can accuse somebody and take away their guns. And I would say most rural legislators, Republican and Democrat, even though it's mostly Republican, are not interested in any more gun restriction bills. The Senate is said we're looking for any ideas that work, and those don't work. We're looking for solutions that actually work. The 2 things that we have focused on that I think we can get bipartisan support and actually pass, one is making our schools as safe as they possibly can be, the structures themselves. We provided some resources for that last year. I think in the end it was like $25 million that got through. We had $75 million, but the governor vetoed a couple bills. But there was more than $200 million of requests for more resources. And the second thing we can focus on is more resources for mental health, like mental health counselors in schools or available to schools. There have been 2 shootings in Minnesota in the last 50 years. So it is something that's terrible. It's 2 in the last 50 years. But we've had 50 suicides, teen suicides, every year. So if we're talking about focusing on mental health, we actually address a couple of issues. And so that's where we're going to be. There's going to be a number of very aggressive anti-Second Amendment bills coming out of the House, controlled by the Democrats. The Senate, controlled by the Republicans, will stop them. And then one thing about projects. So the Camp Ripley Veterans Trail, but it's any project that you guys are looking at that you want to do. The reason why it was successful is many different different sides of the community came together, built coalitions, built consensus, and it came to pass. So it wasn't just one group or one person, it was many groups. And that's true of any project that you guys work on that you're going to bring to the legislative process. Is there consensus? That's how it gets done.
Well said.
Okay, thank you. Greg.
Good morning, gentlemen. Greg Gazelka, Mayor, Little Falls. First of all, I want to thank both of you for meeting with us down at the Capitol, responding to phone calls, responding to texts, responding to emails. I think it's very important, the communication both ways that we have right now and hopefully continue. There are so many things going on down at the legislature now that affect Central Minnesota, your districts, this region, and especially our community, from wastewater infrastructure, which you're both very well informed about, the $7 million that was supposed to be allocated to us last year, which is presently in a lawsuit, which would have an extreme effect on our community as far as taxes. The longer it takes to get those dollars, the higher the price tag is becoming. And once again, these were upgrades that have been required by the state. So we would appreciate your help and really appreciate what you've done for us so far. And just briefly, I would mention other things like the LGA. I know there's discussions on daycare and numerous other things. And we really need and appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Go first.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. The bill on the wastewater, funny as it is, I think is one of the most sought after bills. I mean, it's the one that I don't see many bills like this where everybody wants it because it was the right bill and it had the right projects. So I have pretty good confidence that's going to get done. It may be a little bit of a curvy path to get there, but I think that's going to get done, and I know the Senate's been working hard on that as well. Everything else you said, yeah, I'm in full agreement with. We have to grow our communities, and it's a people problem. I see John coming up next. I'm sure he's going to talk about the daycare, but I won't steal your thunder, but without some of the things he's going to talk about, we're not getting folks here. And I'm just going to be very honest with you. If there are no folks here, there is no tax base, there is no industry, there is no future. And that's just, that's the way economics work.
Yeah, and just, Greg, on the wastewater, the House from last year actually, because they wanted to go up in spending a little bit because they saw a real need for wastewater infrastructure in a lot of places. And so they said, let's tap a fund that normally isn't tapped for that. That's why we have the lawsuit, but without them stretching out to try to do a little more, Little Falls wouldn't have had a project. And so, so I don't fault the system, but the courts are going to have to decide. But my commitment to Little Falls is that we find a way to do it one way or the other by end of session. There's been proposals to just change it all to GO bonds instead of the way it was funded. And some people like that and some people don't. And it's kind of a new mix of people. And it takes a supermajority to pass in the House and Senate. And so I don't think I have it right now. But I am working towards a win.
I'm just going to comment on that. And Senator Gazelka, and he summed that up very nicely. One thing I'm going to mention about that, what we did on that in the House, and I'll be honest, we looked very closely at those funds. And what we did was not unconstitutional. In fact, we used those funds exactly what they should be for, which is clean water. So guess what? I mean, if you're cleaning up the water that's coming out of the sewage treatment plants, you're doing what those funds say. Now, I've had people come back to me and say, don't use that money. Don't. And here's the fact of the matter, folks. You've elected me to solve problems. I went down there and I solved problems. I'm not breaking the Constitution. I'm finding creative ways to help our communities. And so that's how I look at it. We had great support. We had some rogue groups that decided to do a lawsuit because they didn't think the funds should be used for that. And they're environmental groups that care about clean water. So I'm not quite sure how this works out. But that's where we're at with it. So my commitment to you is, I'm going to look for creative ways. We've worked well with the Senate. I mean, you have to fight for resources, because I can tell you, if we don't, there are 133 other districts that will fight against me, and 67 other Senate districts that'll fight for resources, because we're all in this thing, the same thing. We're trying to improve our communities. So sorry for the little bit of a diatribe, but I wanted to add to it.
Okay, thank you. John.
Yes, John Rademacher, City Administrator for City of Little Falls. I was going to just ask if there will be a Senate bill that's going to mirror what House File 80 is doing, and that's just the conversion of the bonding bill into general obligation. It seems that one progressed through the House it's progressing through the House pretty quickly and solves the issue, as the mayor stated. We have a grant that will fund $7 million of our wastewater project. We intend to bid that project this spring. It was on a long and very arduous decision for the council to come to make sure to do this plant operation, and the use of those grant dollars were very important in us moving forward with that project. And at this time, which, as the mayor said, is getting more and more expensive every day. So if the longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes on the people and the residents and the utility payers in Little Falls, because the $7 million is the absolute top cap of that grant that we can access. So by dragging the project out, it doesn't give us more money for it. So having a solution to that either comes through funding the bonding bill and funding that point source implementation grant, or if it doesn't happen, then a direct appropriation to us for the money that we're eligible for would be very important to have accomplished this session on ours. As far as daycare goes, I see that there are a couple of bills that are being proposed. What the information that I'm learning, speaking to providers, trying to engage with the business community, and also those on the inspection side, now working with Sourcewell, who does the county licensing for family care providers. Solutions that we need for our community come with dollars attached, as well as some modifications in the regulations too. What we're struggling is the economics of daycare are such that we cannot charge enough for the families to get the coverage to also then pay for the construction and operations of a facility. And we are suffering from about a 475 child deficit to licensed spots in our community, which we're not alone. Greater Minnesota is suffering from this, all from every corner of the state, but we need resources, we need support to help solve these matters, because it does go into what Ron was saying as a workforce issue. I know of families that I've spoken to that had intended to take jobs in Little Falls, both spouses, but without daycare, they weren't able to make that happen. When I came to this community 3 years ago, I had to spend 3 months apart from my family because we didn't have a daycare option available to us. Fortunately, we're one of the lucky ones where we were able to find something, but I know of so many families right now that have infant kids that they're spending 5 days out of the week, they're going a different place, and they're just doing everything they possibly can to make it work so that they can keep working. And it's a struggle every single day for those families. It's a struggle to be in this position and feel like I'm trying to accomplish things and not having the resources or a solution to really solve that issue immediately. One last thing that I wanted to address and ask for your support. We've been working on a project, and I'm certain that you've heard about it, with Barrett Pet Foods. And one of the roadblocks that we're running into is with our gas utility. They're informing us that they're at their capacity for supply to our community, that they won't engage with upgrading that infrastructure unless the company that's coming and asking for this increase is going to pay for it. And the question is, how much is that really supposed to cost? So we're really at a crossroads of, can we even expand more businesses to our community, create more opportunities to our community if we're held back by something that right now isn't in our control? And
Is this Synergy?
This is CenterPoint Energy.
CenterPoint.
Yeah. They're our one natural gas supplier in town. So we do have access to some nearby transmission lines for natural gas, but there's a lot of concern about if they're not willing to do it, how might we be able to solve this? So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and know that we're hopeful, or we want, potentially some action taken to make sure that we can bring in the resources that we need to grow our community and make it a better place to live. Thanks.
Take it.
I'm just going to say thanks, John. I'm going to let Senator Gazelka, I'm sure we're going to be in pretty close lock and step on it, but thank you. I agree with your comments.
So first of all, John, House File 80, the wastewater infrastructure one, I have to have 41 votes. I have 35 Republican senators, so right now I'm not there. That's why I said my commitment is end game to make it happen. If I can get it done earlier, I will. We're exploring a number of different options that I have phone calls with the Democratic Speaker of the House, of which I can't share with you now because you won't keep it a secret. But I'm fully aware. And then on daycare, that was one of the top 5 issues that we listed. We listed 5 issues that we want to focus on in the Senate: mental health, daycare, healthcare costs, the tax conformity bill, and then waste, fraud, and abuse in government. And so those are kind of our key things that we're looking at. And daycare, one of the things in rural Minnesota is regulations. Everywhere we go, people say the regulations are driving a lot of people out of the business. Maybe not the big ones, but the ma and pa ones. And so it's on our radar. We have a number of senators that are carrying legislation to work on that one. And then finally, John, on the last one related to the natural gas capacity, if you'd send me, and I'm assuming Ron, an email on that one's first time on my radar. I wasn't aware of it.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. Robin.
Robin Hensel, and I live here in Little Falls. I think most people here probably are aware that not only do I value my First Amendment rights, but everyone in this state. And it is because of that that I'm here today. Even though you sponsored Senate File 247 and introduced H 400, which became 2 laws in 2017 at Minnesota Statutes 3.226 and 16.6C, rather, .053. As your constituent, I'm requesting that you now sponsor or co-sponsor a bill to repeal them. These 2 nearly identical laws seriously impede my rights to free expression, association, and religion under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Similar laws in other states have now been struck down by federal courts, and there is a looming possibility that these laws will soon meet the same fate, all at the expense of Minnesota's taxpayers. As you know, these 2 laws were introduced as measures encouraged by the State of Israel to counter the rapidly growing and popular BDS movement. BDS is short for Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions, modeled after the boycott movement that helped defeat apartheid in South Africa. And segregation here at home, an international BDS movement engages in nonviolent boycotts designed to put political and economic pressure on the State of Israel to end its human rights abuses and discriminatory practices against Palestinians. The state principles of international BDS movement are simple. They are that nonviolent punitive measures should be maintained until Israel meets its obligation to recognize the Palestinian people's inalienable right to self-determination and fully complies with the precepts of international law by ending its occupation and colonization of all Arab lands and dismantling the wall, recognizing the fundamental rights of Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel to full equality, and respecting, protecting, and promoting the rights of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes and properties as stipulated in U.S. Resolution 194. Thus, those who engage in BDS activities do so to express to Israel that its human rights violations and discriminatory practices are wrong and that there will be an economic price to pay. This is a direct expression of an idea. The federal courts that have now examined other states' similar anti-BDS laws have so found. Moreover, the Supreme Court has long stated that the government may not prohibit the verbal or nonverbal expression of an idea merely because society finds the idea offensive or disagreeable. Minnesota statutes 3.226 and 16.C.053 are unconstitutional because they require prospective vendors and contractors who wish to boycott Israel to refrain from this First Amendment protected expressive conduct in exchange for a state contract. The statutes are also a violation of the First Amendment because they are hopelessly vague. The Supreme Court has held that the government may not compel the endorsement of ideas that it approves, and if there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, national, religion, or other matters of opinion or force citizens to confess by work or act their faith therein. These two laws are directly designed to compel the endorsement of the idea that boycotting Israel to promote human rights is somehow unorthodox. As such, these laws are unconstitutional. They also defame Minnesota's image as a rigorous protector of free speech. They invite lawsuits that the state will lose. I therefore ask for your support in sponsoring or co-sponsoring a bill to promptly repeal these two laws because, as a matter of religion and conscience, I support the right to boycott Israel in the nonviolent movement for Palestinian human rights. No one should be excluded from contracting with the state of Minnesota for doing so. Thank you.
I sponsored that bill. It's one of the best bills that we did last year. I had incredible bipartisan support. My question to you is, how long do we want to perpetuate the hatred of the Jewish people? I think we have enough anti-Semitism out there already. If you read that bill, and I wrote it, and Robin, you're wrong. I did not have Israel supporting me. I did not have anybody coming to me. I worked with Jewish people who said, Ron, we have bombings in our synagogues. We have kids that are discriminated against every day. How long is this going to come up? So what we put was a common sense law that simply says this. If you as a company want to discriminate against Israel, go right ahead. But you can't do it and apply for state funds. We are not going to allow you to use taxpayer dollars and discriminate against people. Robin, if you do this with homosexuals, you do this with people of African American descent, you do this with any other protected class, you cannot use state dollars for discrimination. You cannot. So to say that this is unconstitutional, first of all, you have no idea because you're not a Chief Justice, and I can't make that determination. I'm a legislator. I put a bill out. We had huge bipartisan support. And if you want to continue to perpetuate anti-Semitism, I think Representative Omar is doing a great job. You just join right ahead with her. But I will not continue to push hatred. That's not who I am. And so I'm going to leave it. I had my say, and I'm going to leave it there.
That is not anti-Semitic to call out the Zionist government who was perpetuating a concentration camp, the largest open-air concentration camp in the world. And would you have done this? Would you have written legislation to do the same thing for the South African issue?
Have you been to the Holocaust Museum?
At this point in time, what is being discussed is not getting picked up on the microphones. So this is being recorded. This is a bigger conversation to be had. We heard you, Robin. They heard you, and we will continue on with our next question.
Before you turn on the tape, then I just, to be clear, I'm absolutely where Representative Kresha is. I very rarely text out or tweet out against somebody, but it's that trend or attitude, and Representative Omar had her like the fifth one, and I finally said that's enough. And even Nancy Pelosi asked her to publicly apologize, and so it's a trend that both Ron and I are very concerned about, Robin.
Okay. And we'll continue on.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Kresha. Thank you, Gazelka, for being here. My question, I'm Devin Janisek. I'm here at the Little Falls Care Center. My question is related to long-term care. Life expectancy is constantly increasing with medical advancements, and fertility rate is decreasing. With the projected socioeconomic and demographic patterns leading up to 2030, how do we plan to adjust our long-term care facilities to both for employment and ability to provide the care that's needed for the residents?
Bingo. That's one of the biggest problems that we have to face. If you look 5, 10, 15 years from now, the number of people over 65, the cost projections are in the billions of dollars of increase. And so it is the very question that I'm asking people to answer for me right now. We already have a budget that has grown about 39%, our state budget, 39% over the last 8 years. And if we don't figure out how to bend some of the spending curves, particularly in HHS, I'm not saying cuts, but slowing the growth of some things, we're not going to be able to answer that looming problem that is not going away. So it's the same question I'm asking. I'm asking our chairs to be digging into this issue, and any advice you have, I am open to.
I'll just say ditto. Thank you for raising the issue, and yeah, we'll do the best we can on that.
Okay, next.
My name is Sylvia Schwartz. I'm from the Twin Cities. And I'd just like to continue on what Robin was saying. First of all, I'm a Jewish American, and I believe in equal rights. And I think that all of us believe in equal rights, and I believe that you also believe in equal rights, Representative Kresha, and that's why you brought... Pardon me?
Kresha.
Kresha, I'm sorry. And I think that's why you brought the bill up, and that's why it passed, because you thought that it would increase or decrease anti-Semitism. The bill or the law that was passed is unconstitutional, and it does restrict free speech. And this was ruled in the U.S. District Court of Arizona just recently in December in the case of Jordahl versus Brnovich et al. And they said that it's unconstitutional and an infringement of First Amendment right of free speech. So I don't want to repeat everything that Robin was saying, but I want to say that since I am a Jew, I do not believe that either what Representative Omar said or the fact that you are preventing people from their free speech rights to boycott Israel. I think that those are not anti-Semitic speech, and your law does not restrict anti-Semitism.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say thank you, and I appreciate the clarification. If someone wants to run a bill to repeal it, that's how the legislative process works.
Okay, Kathy.
Hey, good morning. Thank you both, Senator Gazelka and Representative Kresha, for being here this morning. I just have a couple things. At the forefront of my mind, Sheila Watercott from the school district couldn't be here, and I don't think Steve Jones is here. Our Drug-Free Communities grant will expire in September, so we're looking at a way to fund a drug-free program in the schools. We've done some great things with St. Gabriel's Health, and then, did I introduce myself? Kathy Lang, I'm sorry. And I'm not dangerous. Thank you, Danny, for pointing that out, but I assure you that I am not. So anyway. Anyway, just wanted to point out that we need to have drug awareness and a curriculum in school for teaching our high school, middle school youth. That Minnesota Student Survey has shown like a 10% decrease in students sharing Schedule III and Schedule IV drugs. So just kind of a note on that. But actually, I'm also here representing, partnering with Oasis Central Minnesota. At the hospital, we recently noticed an influx of homeless people coming in for warmth and food. The hospital cafeteria, I'll plug it a little, is the cheapest menu and food in town, and kind of people know that. But looking for food, warmth, we've had some stories where people had nothing and were coming into the hospital to use the facility. So with that in mind, calling Greg and Rose about what can we do, because I know they're boots on the ground with that, and really want to garner your support with trying to find a good homeless shelter in Morrison County. We have nothing. Basically what happens is what Oasis Central Minnesota does, but in the hospital setting, our crisis team has to be called, or the Salvation Army, and it's kind of putting a Band-Aid on things. So I'd kind of like to work towards that and building something in our community with like a community health worker that can help with resources to get those people employed, reconnect with family, because of course they're coming from possibly addiction, mental health, various issues. So thank you for your support, and I hope we can continue those talks together. And possibly Rose can come up and give you more statistics on what that looks like in Morrison County. I don't want to butt in line with Brian, so thank you again.
Just one.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, one quick comment too. I mean, I love that you guys were helping literally solve the opioid abuse problem nationally, and so if there are ideas, again, why not they come from this county, you know, for homelessness? I mean, so, and just so you know, I just looked at Julie Rosen's bill within the last few days, and resources for the opioid pilot program in Morrison County are in there.
So one thing I was just going to say, and I know there's a lot of people in here that are on community groups and in lots of influential circles. One thing I would point you to, if you can find a way to get behind Oasis and work with Rose, people don't recognize the amount of the problem we have with homelessness. It's not what you think it is in Morrison County. I mean, you go down to the cities, you can identify what you think homelessness is, but here homelessness is the kids that are sleeping in other kids' couches because mom and dad are having problems, or it's someone that lost a job that just is too proud to admit that they don't have a place to stay. And you'll see them and they're in the grocery stores and they look just like you and I, but the struggles they're going through, I wish we could get more people to get behind those. I know that I've worked with fathers that have gone through divorces and they're trying to figure this out and they can't go back to their own home because of the conflict, and they just have no place to go. And suddenly they're sleeping in their cars or they're sleeping on somebody's couch, and then that leads to all of the issues that they're going to lose their job, and it just cascades. So I guess we can try to solve this, and we're looking for programs to help out. Rose has been, and Greg have been doing a great job. But it is a plea to the community, in our faith community and other things. Find a way. It's like foster care. If we can find a way to take some of these individuals in, sometimes it's just temporary. Sometimes it's just 90 days of getting somebody back on their feet that's going through a really tough spot. So I would just, again, you're doing a great job, and if we can find more people, I mean, if every service organization here, I think we're doing a great job with the athletics, but if we bought a few less jerseys and put a few more people into warm environments, I think we could also move this needle forward. So thank you for your work.
And if charitable gaming would stop taking 36% of the proceeds?
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint, yeah. Brian?
Good morning, gentlemen. Brian Bernander, St. Autos Care Center. We've had some conversations over the years, and the long-term care industry and senior care will continue to be on your docket, I'm sure. The Health and Human Services budget is large, and ideas have been to separate out those two completely. So you've got senior care and then the other areas. So just my 2 cents there. Certainly open for any further follow-up you'd like to do there. But I would just want to note, a handful of years ago, I stood before here and said, stick with your convictions. Right? You're there because we've elected you. You have strong convictions and you communicate that. Do that. Senator Gazelka, you made a very poignant point today that I haven't heard initially for years, was it's about communication. Regardless of what side you're on or however the issues are, please continue the communications. That's why you're there, and we appreciate that standpoint, and thank you for growing into that as well over the years. So thank you, gentlemen. Stay warm.
Thanks, Brian.
Roman Watuki, a resident of Morrison County. You came up here to divide government in Minnesota. We're the only state. Last year, it wasn't dividing government, and I think we pretty much had a disastrous legislative session. There's a lot of good points being brought up here today that can be dealt on. I'm in disagreement with any of them. But you take, and I don't like digging into the past, but you take a look at last year's legislative session, in the dark of the night, with a handful from the House and a handful from the Senate, put up 960-some page bill with no input from the minority party, and expected Governor Dayton to sign that bill. I think you're relatively smart people, but when you throw a bill out on the table like that, and I know Governor Dayton, and I know Governor Wells, if the bill comes out like that this year, last minute, no debate off the floor, that bill's going to also get built. Let's go down there and keep an open policy. On the House side, Melissa says she threw away the mute button, so the minority party like Ron can have input on the bills. Where last year, the speaker down, he didn't want to listen to the minority party, he pushed the mute button.
Never happened.
How come it's a mute button taken out? So I'm just telling you.
You never pressed it once.
But you take a look at the other issue. On $98 million that was taken out of the legacy fund. That was a constitutional amendment for the basic people. The constitutional amendment in that bill says the money is coming out of the lottery goes for arts, culture, and environment. And if you take a look at that bill and read it, and I think these are pretty intelligent people, you should have knew that I was going to get a court challenge or get vetoed by the governor. But instead, the governor says this should be brought up at the next legislation, not that he was against it. I think some of that stuff got to come out and look at that stuff. I know you're intelligent people, but I've read that legacy fund bill, and I'd say it's unconstitutional what you did with the money, the way it's allotted. The money says it's what it's supposed to be used for, environment, and not supposed to be used for government project. And my question to you is, what are you going to do to prevent all these good things these people are bringing out here to end up in a mess like last year at the end of the session, 960-page bill, months of work thrown out on the table, and not have an open process?
You want to go first?
Sure. Doesn't matter. The one thing I love about this job is we can disagree. And Roman, I appreciate everything you said. I think a lot of that is rhetorical. I was down there. Let me give you some examples. The reason the bill was 966 pages, and by the way, the previous majority did the exact same thing. When the Democrats are in power, you only have so many bills, and I will tell you, you only have so many ways to get things through. People may not agree with it. It's fun. It's great campaign fodder, but the campaign's over. The reason the bill was 966 pages was because we changed health statutes, because we were addressing the opioids and a 7% waiver. So when you change a statute in law, you have to reprint the whole statutes. Well, the Health and Human Services statute is the biggest statute out there. So guess what? You end up printing a lot of pages. So it's 966 pages. And by the way, if you go back to your third grade social studies, we're representative government, which means you elect me to do my job, which is to represent you and to know what's in that bill. I did. I read the bill. Let me tell you some of the bills that have come out this year from the Democrats who hated that 966-page bill. Safe schools. That was in the bill. I authored it. Opioids. Governor loved that. They're coming right back. That was in the bill. Governor vetoed it. Water treatment. I don't know how, and you can make the case, and I guess we can disagree on this. I don't know how you can say the legacy is for clean water, but running dirty water through the wastewater treatment plants is not adhering to that. I don't understand. I mean, I've looked in the dictionary. Clean water is clean water is clean water. So, I mean, the legacy amendment says arts, environment, clean water. I'm struggling to figure out if we're cleaning up water, how we're not using legacy dollars. I get we're splitting hairs because people don't like it. The governor could have line item vetoed that. He didn't. Why? Because he knew it was the right thing to do. Reinsurance, just heard it in Commerce. I heard your Democrat colleagues, all they said was reinsurance is the worst thing we can do. We just passed out of Commerce that was a bill that was authored by Representative Halverson, who, by the way, on the House floor last year, hated the bill and said this was the worst thing we could do. But guess what? It kept insurance rates down. And now they're reauthoring the bill. Why? Because it worked. So, I mean, here's the thing, folks. The bill that we put together had a tremendous amount of good stuff. You may not like the vehicle. You may not like the fact that it was in a Volkswagen versus a whole bunch of little cars, but it was still really good. And every one of those bills has been reintroduced and will probably get passed. I know the way this place works. We go back and forth. But do your homework. What we did was really, really good stuff. Broadband, clean water. I mean, we put more money into schools in the last 4 years. I didn't hear you talk about that. Go ask your schools how we did. So if you want to enter campaign season already, it's a little early. But I'm going to tell you, we're doing pretty good work down there.
Just a couple comments. I mentioned that Minnesota likes divided government for whatever reason, and so it makes us work a lot harder. What happens in the end is you don't have anything way left and you don't have anything way right if you're going to actually get something done. And the budget is every other year. So if you go back 2 years ago, that's what we're doing this year. And that was one of the most productive sessions in Minnesota ever, with a Democrat governor signing Republican bills. We had more transportation funding for roads and bridges. We took half the sales tax on auto parts to put into roads and bridges. The governor signed that. We did a tax relief bill, bipartisan tax relief bill, that had tax relief for senior citizens. Under $70,000 of income got a break. We had ag property tax relief, student loans, because we recognized it was a debt or a problem with debt. They got a $500 credit. Small business got property tax relief. And so everywhere we turned, there was something good there. We got real ID done, which hadn't been done in 10 years, and we were the last state and needed to get it done. All of that happened. And so in divided government, it's never, ever easy. But in the end, if you can figure out how to communicate, then you can focus on the things that need to get done. And I'm convinced that that will happen this year with a different governor, just like it happened 2 years ago.
Very good. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cammie Peterson DeVries with St. Francis Health Services, and we have Little Falls.
What was the first name?
Cammie.
Thank you.
Yes. And so I just wanted to add on to what Devin, the Environmental Services Director, had stated about looking at investment in the facilities and the finances of that. We understand that we've been in this trajectory of, of costing money, and a lot of it really was due to because of how much of a deficit there had been for so long, that investment really had not been made into long-term care. We still in our state of Minnesota have facilities that operate at a 1% to negative 1% margin. And when you look at our finances, we actually close out our year on September 30th, but we won't get reimbursed that till 2020. And so there's this gap in that. And so in order for us to invest into our future of our facilities, meaning now, we don't even see that return for upwards sometimes of 20 months. And when that occurs, then that really affects how we can pay people. It really affects the improvements we can make within the facility. So we really need some built-in systematic approach that says if there's a cost of living, what do we do then for our staff to do that cost of living? So that's one area that I want to talk about. The second is that we do want to invest in our employees, and there's been some great movement in grants, and there's been some great movement in reimbursement and that type of stuff that allows us scholarships for our employees. However, we need those broadened to include different types of things that we need. To include maybe looking at the structure of our long-term care and how do we diversify some of that employment to actually fulfill the needs of our residents, and how do we attract those people. I also teach nursing students, and I can tell you we have to increase what it looks like in long-term care for our students. I can tell you I go into a class of 60 to talk about the NCLEX exam, and maybe one out of 60 is willing to go into long-term care. Why is that? We teach them that long-term care is not valued. And so until we start to really show that we have value in the very strong seniors who have supported us through all of this, and that we all have legacies because of them, we need to do that. The third thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is that we know that what's in the forefront is abuse and neglect. And we are working on a campaign that says I care as a long-term care through our Leading Age Minnesota. There are far more of the positive stories that go on. And it's the one or two that make the paper that really destroy our industry. And really, it's good people that aren't going to want to do this anymore. And so we're getting leadership people saying, why would I put my license on the wall when I can get somebody that says that there's an abuse? I can get the state survey team in there, and I get this immediate jeopardy, and it gets plastered all over the paper, and it wasn't something that I had control over. So there's just this whole piece, but I also ask you not to slap regulations on it just by a blanket regulation, because that's not going to help the problem. We need to figure that out as a team, together, providers, consumers, and advocacy. So thank you for your service, and thank you, Senator Gazelka. I know that your leadership has been very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one thing Cammie, I wanted to bring up, you brought up the abuse thing. You brought up the abuse issue. Let me tell you from my perspective, first of all, the first thing I did when the abuse issue came up is I started to call our local providers, because the last thing we need to do is paint this in a way that you make our local providers look bad. Those are the saints of the world that are walking around and working in those hallways, and there were some groups down there that decided to make this an issue. They wanted to make this ugly because they wanted to score points. And to your point about the regulations, we looked at the reports. I read the auditor's report. The report was not that, I mean, there's some bad actors and there's some repercussions, and I know that the institutions and facilities dealt with those bad actors, but the real issue on the report was that issues were getting up into the government agencies that weren't being acted on. That was the real issue. It was not our local providers that were doing a bad job. And so we fought hard against that, and I will continue to stand up, and I'll always call the local providers to find out. But I just want to come out on the record and say, and make sure this is abundantly clear, that every provider, without exception, that I have visited in our area, I would put any of my relatives in. And thank you for the work you do. Although you've retired now, you don't do this stuff, right?
Still working.
I saw you sitting over there trying to get away.
Still working.
Oh, Greg, you're coming next. I'm Rose Surma. I live in Little Falls, and I'm with Oasis Central Minnesota. Thank you, Kathy, for talking about some of the collaborative work we're doing. Our organization has been in the community for decades. Actually, I think it was 1989 that we got our tax-exempt status, so this is our 30-year anniversary. We've had a history working with housing and homeless, and more recently we've been more active in that area. We're a small organization, but we're growing to serve more of the housing need. This past year, we served more than 100 individuals that did not have housing. 57% of those were minor children. So most of these individuals that are affected by this crisis are minor children. And they really deserve safety and dignity and the ability to grow healthy. I'm trying to look here. It is a community. We need community support and community collaboration, so I appreciate that being said, and Ron, what you brought up about our organization. I'm also happy to hear that a lot of the other issues that intersect with homelessness are a priority for you. Issues like addiction, mental health, daycare and childcare, transportation, and also schools. Those are all really important things in our community. Trying to think of what more to say. That's about all I have to say. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for your support of our community and organization.
Thank you.
Oh, do you have anything to respond?
She did great.
Okay.
Why would I?
Okay.
I know when to go out on a high note.
All right, Raquel.
Good morning. I'm Raquel Lundberg, and I'm on the Little Falls City Council. Thank you, Senator Gazelka and Representative Kresha, for being here today. As you know, we've been talking about putting a bridge over the river and over the tracks. So the river is not what divides Little Falls east and west. It's the railroad tracks. This winter, my husband and I pulled up, crossed the river. We were on the bridge. The train was there, so we were stopped on the bridge waiting for the train to go by, and a fire truck pulled up next to us with its lights on, and it had to stop. And I looked at my watch, and it was 1 minute and 45 seconds before the train went by and the fire truck could get to the emergency. A life could have been saved in that time. So I'm just wondering where we are in getting funding. If you could update us on getting funding. We need an additional $20 million to have that bridge go over the tracks. Are you helping us with that? Where are we at?
So we're both interested. It competes, every project competes with all the communities. I think last year there was something like, I think it was $4 billion of requests, and just in round numbers, $1 billion got funded. And so it's important to start the process if you expect to have a project get funded. And so just a number of projects that I've worked on that they didn't start in the first or second, they got done in the fourth or the 6th or the 10th year. I mean, it just takes time to convince enough legislators that your project deserves to be paid. And that's what we work on. But that's the short answer.
So how do we convince them? Us as a community, how do we convince? You're convinced. How do we convince everyone else?
You have any?
Yeah, I get. So that's not how it works. Let me put it to you this way.
It's up to you to convince them, right?
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
In some of those backroom deals that we did, and in the bills we put, and Senator Gazelka's being very modest, we worked a deal out. We had this money last year. We had the infrastructure. We had done this, and it was vetoed. And in fact, in a very creative way, it was moved. And I'm just going to be honest. I know Paul's going to be more humble about this. But I remember we were having a conversation in the hallway. We were bringing the transportation chair. I was working in the House. He was working in the Senate. And we figured out a way, and actually Paul had figured out a way, that we could use some transportation dollars to move this. So it's a matter of getting to a solution. Now, I would love to say that we can go down and meet with 81 legislators in the House and say, let's get this done. But now we're on a reset. We had an opportunity. That door's been closed. Now we're back to square one. I have to build in my majority a whole coalition to get this into that bill. And I'll tell you, it's going to be harder because the minority has shifted to the majority, who all has projects. I was in the majority. I had projects. So now I'm competing against them, and that's just the way it works. So I hear the urgency. Don't think for a minute we're not trying to figure out solutions. The reality is the sands have shifted, and now I wish I had the power to go convince people that I have my ideas and they're the right ones, but that's changed in the House. So the best that I can tell you is, we're going to keep working on these. At least I will in the House. You have my commitment. I know Paul has been very vested in our area. So we look for those opportunities. I guess that's the best I can tell you. I mean, letters to the governor, squeaky wheel gets oil. So if you can convince the governor, and I have nothing despairing to say about him, see, if you can get the governor on board, our jobs are really easy. So that's where I would take you next.
Thank you.
I'll underline that one. If you're prominent Democrat or no prominent Democrats. You know, I'm always trying to connect and build relationships, and Ron is exactly right. If the governor engages as well, then it just goes up the line.
Greg Spofford, serving this year as an AmeriCorps Vista with Oasis Central Minnesota. I was going to show you that I could not say anything, but on behalf of the people that Rose and Kathy Lang, we're looking forward to a potential partnership. I would say, first of all, thank you to you who are giving us an update and listening so very keenly. I would also like to thank our community, because our community does rally. And even although the challenge increases, our community does rally. And especially for the homeless, a passion, those who are dealing with all those related issues that rose. I just want to offer a success story in our smaller venture right now. There's a gentleman right now who was a concern here and in St. Cloud when he lived down there initially. But once given the opportunity to no longer be homeless, no longer be cold, and in need of some mental health medication that is not addicting but assists with his mental health, he is giving back. He's volunteering with us. We also have a family that we just were struggling to find a place for. And darned if somebody, offered a house. Dad is no longer able to live at home, living at a long-term care facility, which, boy, watching for our seniors, all the issues that came up today, really important. But then that family was able to offer that house, and we have a mom and 4 kids. Kids are back in school. They had to leave the community for a while, weren't doing well in another community, and they're successful right now. Yes, there's more issues. Yes, we need to walk with them a little bit. But when we do, oh my gosh. I think that's all that has to be said. Just thank you, and keep it up, all right?
Thank you.
Hey, Lauren.
I think you get to be our last question.
I'm Lauren Morey from Motley. That's way on the north end of Morrison County.
Nice this time of year.
Anyhow, I just have a couple of questions for clarification.
Yeah.
The pipeline was brought up with our first speaker, and I'm curious, does the governor have the last say on that, or do you gentlemen have something to say about how that turns out? That would be one question I'd have.
Let me answer that one right away then. The governor could have made a decision to not further it in the courts, but he chose to continue that. Now it really is a court decision. I think most people feel like the courts will uphold the lower court, and that delays the process, so that's the best case scenario, but it is a court, it's a separate branch, and they could actually in some way defeat it, and so time will tell now.
And then moving north, what about the mines? Are we through the courts there, or we got to go to more courts up with the mines?
I know that Polymet made the last hurdle. Twin Metals is on the north side of the Laurentian Divide, and so there's another issue as far as where the water flows. So I would expect more in the process yet.
So another 10 years, or could be.
I don't think it'll be, for Polymet, I expect it to be within a year that they actually are mining, but Twin Metals, it could be a long time.
Yeah. The third thing I would like to say is I applaud you for your stance on pot, and I hope that you can continue to be strong on that issue. Medical marijuana, I think, is okay, but I sure don't think we need recreational. And then I think I have shared with you gentlemen before, the nurse staffing issue, I think, is to be taken care of at local hospitals, not with the government. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Lauren, just a couple things. The nurse staffing thing, and Lauren, by the way, if you don't know, has been a tremendous supporter of medical care facilities, especially up in your area. And thank you for that, because that rural access to medicine is important. But the one thing I'll say on the nurse staffing is absolutely, that has to be handled at the local levels. It's a management labor decision. And more importantly, if we, and remember, I say this often, when we get involved as legislators, we mess it up. That's just what happens. When it gets to our level, it means it's risen to a level where we're going to make it wrong for somebody. And nurse staffing, if we make that decision, I can tell you who's going to get hurt the most. It's the long-term care facilities, because we're going to suck all the RNs and those nurses right out of there, and our long-term care facilities are going to suffer the most. So I'm very sensitive to that one. So thank you for bringing that up. And thank you for all your work in helping Motley. I mean, over the years, it's amazing.
So can I make closing arguments and address pot?
Yes, you may.
I love, frankly, that was the last question, because almost everywhere I go with media, it's the first question they ask me. And I just want to tell you that medical marijuana is separate from the issue I'm talking about here, recreational marijuana. I've looked at a lot of data now. Some people ask me, well, is it now or later? And for me personally, it's never. That's where I think we ought to end up. We've seen data from other states. Accidents are up 6%. Homelessness rates are up. Depression among youth is up. Everywhere you turn, there's a bad statistic that comes out for it. What are we going to do about drug testing and people that work? I mean, there's so many areas where it's not going to be good for our culture. And I'm going to be a no. I'm going to give it a hearing. I'm going to let people discuss it, debate it. But my belief is that the Senate will kill that bill.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. And one of the things I must say that, serving with Senator Gazelka, and we've been, it's been a while now.
Been good.
Yeah. And Paul isn't. Paul is very principled as a senator, but he also does meet with people, and we've worked through some issues. In fact, we've gotten to some spots that I didn't think we were going to get to, and a lot of that is his leadership, so I'll echo that. And I just want to come off on the legalization of marijuana. And I hear the arguments, and I don't know if there's anybody here that I get some emails, but there are many people that say, hey, it is just like alcohol. And I do think the penalties could maybe be reduced. I think we're putting some people into jail for infractions that we shouldn't, and that I would be open to looking at. However, if we're going after big pharma and we're going after big tobacco, why would we give them both another product? Because that's really what would happen. On one hand, we're saying, hey, let's cut the smoking and let's cut the pharmaceuticals, but yet we're giving them more access to a product to sell to our kids. That's a problem for me. The other side, and maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but if I look at the opioids and I look at the way chronic inebriation and addiction works, this is just one more avenue that we're giving folks that have really serious problems. You look at Denver, I've looked at the Denver stats, and I look at the social services. Child protection is very important to me. The cases didn't go down, they go up, because you have parents that are struggling, and that if you're under the influence, you can't take care of the kids at the same time. Those kids have to go somewhere. He mentioned under the influence of driving goes up. So I just do not see any compelling reason why we should add this as one more thing to deal with in all the things that we're trying to do. So I get the libertarian argument. I get where people are asking, just saying, hey, you know what, I'm in my home, I'm doing this, and I'm not hurting anybody. And I listen to that, but on the other hand, I have a son who's in the Air Force who reminds me, Dad, I have to be tested for drugs once a month. And in Alaska, marijuana is legal, and I've decided there's just other ways that I can find fun. So I think if it's good for our military, it's probably not a bad practice to put across the board.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we will wrap up today. We want to thank Mark from Great TV for filming for rebroadcast on our local cable access. We want to thank our elected officials. We appreciate you being here. I know Senator Gazelka needs to hit the door running. Perhaps Ron will be here for a few questions afterwards if you didn't get a chance to talk to them. But thank you for being with us today, and thank you for your questions. And remember to keep in contact with your elected officials. They can only represent you if they know your issues. Thank you.